The dressing room on stage 7 was small enough that two women couldn't pass each other without turning sideways. The mirrors ran the full length of one wall, ringed with bulbs that produced a light so white and so honest that there was nowhere to hide inside it. Every pore, every line, every shadow the camera would find before the director called action. She sat there every morning, this woman whose name appeared above the title on the marquee outside, and she did something that would seem almost impossibly simple to the person standing in a Sephora aisle in 2026, overwhelmed by a wall of serums arranged by concern. She opened a jar. She dipped two fingers in. She worked it into her skin in slow circles, the way her mother had shown her, the way her mother's mother had done it before that. Then she wiped it away with a damp cloth, looked at what remained, and called it done. The light told no lies. The skin held. This is not a story about a product. It is a story about a system. A quiet, ordinary, completely unglamorous system that produced something the beauty industry has spent 60 years trying to replicate and sell back to you in 47 separate steps. The women who had it didn't think of it as a system. They thought of it as Tuesday. Before we get to the part that the industry most needs you to forget, subscribe. This channel exists to make exactly this kind of video. Hit that button and let's go. In 1955, the average American woman owned 3 things she put on her face: a jar of cold cream, a tube of lipstick, a compact of pressed powder. That was the complete inventory. No toner, no essence, no targeted eye serum, no retinol night treatment, no vitamin C brightening complex, no SPF moisturizer, no exfoliating acid, no hyaluronic filler, no sheet mask soaking in a foil envelope on the bathroom shelf. 3 things: the jar, the tube, the compact. And the skin that resulted from those 3 things, photographed under studio lights designed specifically to expose every imperfection, captured on film that recorded texture the way modern digital cameras still cannot, was extraordinary. Grace Kelly's complexion in Rear Window was not a product of technology. There was no digital retouching in 1954. What the camera recorded was what was there, and what was there was the result of a routine so simple it has been almost entirely erased from the cultural memory of beauty, replaced by a complexity that generates considerably more revenue. The global skincare market in 2025 is worth over $180 billion. The jar of Pond's cold cream that sat on the vanity table in 1955 cost 49 cents. Something happened in between. This video is about what happened and what was there before it arrived. The cold cream ritual came first, and it came at night. She had been on set since 6 in the morning. The makeup had gone on in layers: foundation, powder, liner, shadow, the precise architecture that the camera required, and ordinary daylight would have found excessive. By the time she sat down in front of that dressing room mirror at the end of the day, her face had been under lights for 12 hours. She didn't reach for a micellar water. She didn't use a cleansing oil followed by a foaming second cleanser in the double cleanse method that would be recommended by every skincare influencer 70 years later. She opened the Pond's jar. Cold cream is an emulsion of water, mineral oil, and beeswax that has existed in some form since the Roman physician Galen described it in the 2nd century. By 1955, Pond's had been in American homes for nearly a century. The formula had barely changed. There was no reason to change it. She worked it in. The cream lifted the makeup, the pancake foundation, the heavy powder, the waterproof mascara, without pulling or stripping. The skin was left not squeaky clean in the way modern foaming cleansers promise, but soft, slightly moisturized, not stripped of whatever oils it had managed to produce over 12 hours under hot studio lighting. Then she wiped it away with a warm, damp cloth. That was the entire routine. No second step. No toner to rebalance the pH the cleanser had disrupted, because the cold cream hadn't disrupted it. No serum to replace the moisture the cleanser had removed, because the cold cream hadn't removed it. The skin was clean, soft, and largely undisturbed. She went to sleep. That is not a simplified version of what she did. That is what she did. Stay with this next part, because it explains something the skincare industry has a significant financial interest in keeping complicated. The skin is an organ. It has a barrier. That barrier exists to keep things out and keep moisture in. When it is intact and functioning, the skin looks the way it looked in those 1955 photographs. When it is repeatedly disrupted, stripped by harsh cleansers, exposed to active acids, overexfoliated, dried, and then expected to recover overnight with the help of a recovery serum, it does not look that way. The beauty industry's business model requires that the barrier be disrupted. Not maliciously, perhaps, but structurally, a product that genuinely worked would eventually stop being necessary. A product that solved a problem it had partially created would require continuous repurchase. The cold cream did not disrupt the barrier. It cleaned the face without stripping it. The skin woke up the next morning largely the same as it had gone to sleep. Not irritated, not reactive, not in need of 17 corrective products applied in the correct order. This is not complicated. It was never complicated. The complication was manufactured later. But the cold cream was only one part of what that skin was doing. The part that never appeared in the beauty column, the part that Ladies' Home Journal and Good Housekeeping could not package or advertise, was coming from the kitchen. In 1955, she ate butter, real butter, from the same glass bottle the milkman left on the porch. She ate the fat in the pot roast. She ate the egg yolk, deep yellow-orange, from hens that ate grass and kitchen scraps in someone's backyard. She ate the collagen that came out of the bones she simmered on Tuesday mornings, the liquid that became soup by Wednesday, the stock that never got called bone broth because it didn't need a name yet. The skin produces collagen. Collagen production requires specific nutrients, vitamin C, zinc, copper, and the amino acids glycine and proline. Glycine and proline are found in significant quantities in one particular food source, connective tissue, bones. The parts of the animal that her kitchen used and modern kitchens discard. She wasn't supplementing collagen, she was eating it, 2 or 3 times a week, in a bowl of soup that cost almost nothing and was made from what would otherwise have been thrown away. The vitamin A in that egg yolk supported cell turnover. The omega-3 fatty acids in the full-fat milk reduced the low-grade inflammation that researchers would later identify as a primary driver of accelerated skin aging. The saturated fat in the butter provided the building blocks for healthy cell membranes throughout the body, including the skin. She ate all of it without reading a single nutrition label. Her skin received what it needed not from a capsule ordered from a wellness website, but from a Tuesday night dinner. In 2025, collagen peptide supplements are a $1.8 billion global industry. They are purchased by people whose kitchens no longer contain bones. This is where the story becomes harder to follow, not because the facts are complicated, but because the chain of events happened slowly enough that no single moment announced itself as the turning point. Sometime in the early 1960s, the milkman's schedule changed. The glass bottles were replaced by cardboard cartons. Full-fat milk was joined on the shelf by low-fat milk, then skim, because the dietary conversation had begun to shift toward fat as a concern. By 1977, the government made it official. She switched to skim. She replaced the butter with margarine. She reached for the low-fat label because the label confirmed what she had been told. What she didn't know was that the low-fat product required something to replace what the fat had provided. Fat carries flavor. When fat is removed, the replacement was sugar, modified starches, processed fillers. The skin that had been receiving fat-soluble vitamins A and E, the omega-3 fatty acids, the collagen-supporting nutrients from full-fat dairy and real animal fat, that skin was now receiving something else, something that looked similar on a label but was not the same product at all. The skin changed, slowly, over years. And into that slow change arrived an industry prepared to offer solutions. The powder room at a department store in 1958 smelled like Chanel No. 5 and warm wool and something faintly waxy, the cold cream on the tissue in the silver wastebasket beside the vanity. A woman reapplied her powder between lunch and an afternoon appointment. She checked her lipstick in the compact mirror. She pressed a tissue to her forehead. She did this in 2 minutes and walked back out. She was not thinking about her pores. She was not calculating how many hours remained before she could apply her evening serum. The skin was maintained. The maintenance was invisible because it was working. The beauty column in her magazine told her about new lipstick shades and the correct way to apply powder in warm weather. What it did not tell her, because there was nothing to sell, was that the cold cream she had been using since her mother handed her the jar at 16 was the most effective skincare product she would ever own. That sentence was not worth printing in 1958. There was no advertiser behind it. There is a detail in this story that keeps surfacing no matter how carefully you try to set it aside. The women in those 1955 photographs were not using sunscreen. The UV protective technology that dermatologists now consider essential did not exist in its modern form. And yet the skin in those photographs, photographed in the full glare of California sun, under the merciless white of studio lighting, did not look the way unprotected skin is supposed to look. Part of this is explained by behavior. She wore hats. She sat in the shade at the pool rather than on the deck. The studio system had its own reasons for keeping its actresses out of direct sun, and those reasons produced a practical habit of shade-seeking that functioned as UV protection without ever being called UV protection. But part of it is explained by something else. The anti-inflammatory nutrients she was eating, the omega-3 fatty acids in full-fat dairy and sardines eaten every Friday, the antioxidants in the vegetables she cooked from scratch, provided a degree of internal defense against oxidative stress that the skin under processed food cannot replicate. This is not a claim that food replaced sunscreen. It is a documentation of what the skin was receiving from the inside when the outside looked the way it did. The sunscreen industry is now worth over $12 billion globally. The sardines on the bottom shelf of the grocery store cost $1.89 a tin. Nobody reaches for them. The sleep ritual deserves its own moment because it was as important as the cold cream and considerably less visible. By 9 o'clock in the evening, the house was quieting. The dishes had been washed, the kitchen put away, and the television, if there was one, had been off for an hour because there was nothing left to broadcast. The evening was simply over, not because of discipline, but because the infrastructure of the evening did not extend past a certain hour. She wrapped her hair in pin curls. She applied the cold cream. She opened the window slightly, because fresh air in the sleeping room was not a wellness concept, but simply how you slept. She was in bed before 10. Skin regenerates during sleep. The hours between 10 at night and 2 in the morning are associated in chronobiological research with the highest rates of cell turnover, collagen synthesis, and repair of UV-induced damage. She was consistently asleep during those hours. Not because she had read a study, because the evening ended. The sleep economy, the melatonin supplements, the weighted blankets, the white noise machines, the blue light blocking glasses, is now worth over $80 billion globally. It is built entirely on the gap between when the evening now ends and when it ended in 1955. The cold cream is still available. Pond's is still on the shelf. What changed was the night around it. There is a woman somewhere, in a photograph from 1957, standing in a church parking lot in a cotton dress with a fitted waist, whose skin looks the way skin is supposed to look. She is not a film actress. She is an ordinary woman on an ordinary Sunday morning, and the camera has caught her in ordinary light. Her skin is clear, not airbrushed, not filtered, not treated with anything developed after 1940. Clear in the way that has become so uncommon that when you encounter it in an old photograph, you stop and try to identify what it is. You think perhaps it is the film quality. You look more carefully. It is not the film. She was not doing anything remarkable. She was doing what everyone around her was doing, because the system was intact and it worked, and there was no reason to replace it with something more complicated. Then the reasons arrived. They came with advertising budgets and clinical-sounding ingredient lists, and before and after photographs taken under carefully controlled lighting. They came with problems she hadn't known she had, described in language that sounded like science, endorsed by people in white coats who appeared in magazine spreads beside the product they were endorsing. She bought the first new product in 1962, then the second. By 1975, the bathroom shelf looked different than it had 10 years before. By 1985, there was an entire category called skincare, distinct from the single jar that had sat beside the sink since before she was born. The jar was still there. She had stopped trusting it. What that woman in the 1957 photograph had was not a skincare routine in the way the word is used now. It was something simpler and considerably harder to sell. She had a kitchen that was still producing real food. She had fat in her diet. The fat that carries fat-soluble vitamins, keeps cell membranes intact, and drives the kind of internal stability that prevents the inflammation eventually written on the skin. She had collagen in her soup. She had omega-3 fatty acids in the fish she ate on Fridays without thinking of it as a health decision. She had sleep because the evening ended at a reasonable hour and nothing had been engineered to extend it. She had cold cream and a damp cloth. That was the complete skincare routine of a woman whose skin looked the way skin is supposed to look. None of it required a subscription. None of it required a 12-step application sequence performed in a specific order to avoid interactions between active ingredients. None of it required a content creator explaining which retinol percentage to begin with and how slowly to introduce it to avoid the purging phase. The purging phase did not exist in 1955. The barrier was not being disrupted frequently enough to require a recovery cycle. Pick one thing from this list: the cold cream, the real food, the earlier evening. Come back in the comments in a month and tell me what changed. The next video is ready.